Welcome to the Golf Improvement Podcast, episode 180.
Welcome to the podcast for golf lovers and enthusiasts who are looking to take their games to new heights. Dedicated to custom club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice to improve your golf game. This is the Golf Improvement Podcast with your host, Tony Wright.
Hello, this is Tony Wright from Game Improvement Golf in Oak Ridge, Tennessee with the Golf Improvement Podcast, dedicated to sharing useful information on professional club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice techniques. I create exceptional golf clubs. You shoot lower scores. When someone with the credentials like Dr. Bhrett McCabe, a clinical and sports psychologist who's worked with many well-known sports teams and athletes, including tour golfers, takes 3.5 years to create a book that became his passion to finish. Well, there's a message there. Break free from Suckville. How a simple mental change will spark your performance was the result of one of his most valuable Suckville experiences. It was terrific to have him get to share with you a lot of different perspectives on performance that you may not have heard of before. Enjoy this delightful interview with Dr. Bhrett McCabe.
Taking your game to new heights. www.gameimprovementgolf.com.
Hello, this is Tony Wright with episode 180 of the Golf Improvement Podcast. And I want to welcome back Dr. Bhrett McCabe. We did a podcast, long ago, like episode 26. But he's a clinical and sports psychologist, founder of the Mindside, a center for sports and performance psychology. But he just launched his third book, Break Free from Suckville. What a great title. And he calls himself the Suckville Doctor, right? How a simple mental change will spark your performance. I checked before we started. Right now, it's number 33 on Amazon in sports and sports psychology books. But I'll bet you have writer's cramps from the number of books you got to autograph in the beginning, because you talked about having a lot of boxes of books. So,
yeah, it was. Look, I love to write, and I love to do things, that kind of that challenge me and allow me to be in a frame of mind where I can, challenge my mindset, challenge my process. Really explore ideas, and I'm not afraid to look at things from a different perspective. And I think the big thing there is, I'm willing to try to look at things as what I would want to look at it from. I'm not one of those guys that gets caught up on, okay, what is the right thing to say? What is the right thing to experience? Yeah, I want people to be challenged by what we talk about. I want people to see the field of psychology, the field of performance, and those facets being a little bit more accessible and being a little bit more, I really think like, helping them without having to get super complicated, full of platitudes, right? I want people to believe that they're capable of doing it. And I think if we can see things from a different perspective and realize that struggle, success, they're not really personal. And what we think, I think the hardest thing about the mental game, Tony, is that we really have never been taught growing up what is appropriate, what is good, what is right, what are the right things to think. And we may say, think positive or stuff like that. But, it's bigger than that. So I have people sit in my office all the time and say, I just don't, I think it's wrong that I feel this way, or I think it's, I probably shouldn't be experiencing pregame anxiety, or because somewhere along the lines they watched a video and somebody acted like it doesn't exist. And it is more than that. And we have to teach people that it's okay to feel the way we feel, and it's okay to struggle. It's okay to, it's okay to grind a little bit. and to find your way through the storm versus thinking it's always cloudy, it's always sunny.
And I liked a little bit of what you said. You see so many things. I don't think is that the right word, platitudes in your book, right?
Yeah.
It's not like da 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 da, and then you put a post and you say, "Oh gosh, this is the thing," right? And it's not the thing. It's I know you know what I'm saying, and I may not be saying it the right way, but it's not throwing something out there and hoping it's going to kind of hit.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think we rarely have processes. We have attempts. We have short-term desires, but not many of us are willing to stick with something when it's not working. If we're going to make the investment to change what we're doing, we need to see pretty early evidence that it's the right path. And if not, what happens is we abandon it and try something new that gives us a short-term fix. That's what gets us stuck in Suckville, though. We get stuck in Suckville, which is the space between what we think it should be and where we are, what our potential is and where our reality is. That space between is what I call Suckville, because we're never comfortable, we're never content, we're never pleased with our performance. You can have the best day of your life and you'll find a way to nitpick it, or you'll tell yourself that you have to do it again and continue to live up to that standard. That's the hard thing, right? And so if you can teach and understand that you have the opportunity to see what's going on in your life from a different perspective, and you can see through it and almost take it like a third person viewpoint and say, look, I don't have to struggle to succeed. I don't have to lose my job to get the great job. I don't have to do that. But there's struggle all along the way. And when we lose that focus on the reality, we start losing the joy in the game. The game becomes a burden. It doesn't give us what we need. It doesn't give us the reinforcements that we had early on. And now we're backsliding.
Yeah. Well, you had some of that in writing the book, didn't you?
Yeah, it took me a little while. I mean, I had an idea, and this book started in a couple places. It started with a client that was sitting in my office. I'd been kind of pushing the idea a little bit of Suckville with some clients, and they seemed to resonate with it. But I had a client who sat down, and I shared him with the idea of Suckville, of falling short and is never good enough, and he's never happy with what he has. And he says, Doc, I'm the mayor of Suckville then. And that caught me. And so about a day or two later, I went out to dinner with a friend of mine who's a marketing guy and a business, and he was in the process of selling his business, and he sold it and did very well with it. But we were talking, and he said, what do you have going on? And I said, this idea just keeps popping in my head, and I want to talk about it. And we sat down, and that night I kind of laid out who the residents of Suckville are, the people who try to hold us there. And he said, you got something. I could see that. And it's easier for me to conceptualize what you're trying to say. He said, why don't you write that in a book? And I did the old arrogant, okay, I'll get it to you in a couple months, maybe 2 or 3 months. Well, that didn't work. And then I finally got a copy together, and I sent it around my team, and I said, hey, we all look at this and make sure I'm on the right path. And the immediate feedback I had gotten was, this is not an uplifting book. In fact, reading the first half of the book, I almost feel depressed. Because what happened was I'm so immersed in working in people's Suckvilles by doing what I do that I just kind of describe the experience of how you get there and what's going on. And people from the outside who read it were like, yeah, that's really harsh. And I wasn't trying to be harsh. I was just trying to describe it. And so the feedback was, listen, we got to give people hope in the beginning. And so I went back, and the way I normally write is I will write with statements, then I'll build paragraphs, then I'll build chapters. And then I will put it away for a couple weeks. And then I'll come back and just randomly pick a section and start editing it. I don't really edit from front to back or back to front. I just randomly pick sections, which is not the easiest way to follow the flow of the book. And if I have a good outline from the beginning, it's easier. But this one I didn't have. I didn't have a good outline. And I struggled with the first half of the book because I struggled with how to describe what Suckville really is before giving a solution without losing people in the depths of it. Because my idea is if people are going to read this book who have struggled, they're going to recognize Suckville pretty soon, and they're going to say, that's me. Okay, now what do I need to do about it? But I couldn't just leave it there because to me, as a psychologist, I do a lot of education. I educate people on why they feel the way they feel because I feel like knowledge is power. And so that was the problem. So I kept working that front. And then It took about 3.5 years to get done, which is significantly longer than I ever anticipated. But then it got to a point where the book was too important to me, the concept was too important to me, and I couldn't let it sit.
Yeah.
And, I would give talks. Sometimes when I'm writing, I will give some talks that allow me to verbalize what I want to say. So I'll build presentations around it. And I liked the presentations, but then I was like, it's so simple. And I don't typically write with like a simple, I don't write like a pamphlet. I want to write something that I can put in front of my clinical faculty who trained me, and they can dig it. And I can put it in front of a person who's young and they can get it. And so it's a fine balance, and that's how I always write. But the other problem with Suckville was, it's who am I writing to? And, this was started before COVID. It definitely amplified during COVID. But Ryan Holiday, who wrote the books, The Obstacle's Way, Ego's the Enemy, he's got a new book called Courage is Calling.
Yeah.
He's mentored me a little bit from a distance. We'll interact, and I spent some time with him on my podcast and went over to Austin, and he said, you have to write to somebody. When you write a book, don't try to write to the masses, write to somebody. Well, this book wasn't written to a certain player. This book was actually written to me, where I know that we go through this. I know that we have these experiences. And so the Suckville subject is written to me of, hey, we all go through these. And this book was an experience of Suckville all along. It was hard. It was a challenge, but I was continually able to continue to work through it and go through what I needed to go through.
Boy, what an interesting guy he is, though, too. I'm listening to his audiobook right now, the one you talked, yes. Courage is the Calling. I guess you're probably going to have him back in your podcast, but I wouldn't be surprised. What he
sent me. He does that with any book that comes out. About a week or two before they come out, he'll send me a box of the book, and I usually will read them ahead of time. But with this one, I had something else going on, so I have not read Courage is Calling yet. And I plan on it. And what I like about his books, they are easy to read. They're quick. They're fast. I don't have as you can tell, even by our interview, I'm not short-winded. So it's just not how my mind functions. Yeah. So. But yeah, I'll definitely have him on again. I mean, I think Ryan he's a modern day philosopher. As he's grown his philosophy and moved out of the Stoics a little bit. It's still Stoically based, but it's not really reporting on the Stoics. Now he's starting to see his philosophies come into play, and I think it's an exciting evolution.
Pretty neat.
Yeah.
Well, you talked a little bit about, one of the pieces of, the symptoms of moving to Suckville, which is, expectations that just don't match, right?
Yeah.
Talk about a few others that you think are important to highlight.
Well, we get impatient, right? We want things to happen faster than they should. And that impatience is tough because as we're competing or as we're going about our process, it's really hard to give up the trust to know that it may be down the road, but that's okay. But that's tough. And that's kind of leads us to having higher expectations. That leads us to a place of being more frustrated quicker. I think one of the bigger ones is kind of how we move through the job, the joy, the job, the burden cycle, as a symptom, which is people will say, and I hear this a lot, is, it's become a burden. I just don't enjoy the game. I just don't enjoy my job like I used to. I just don't enjoy my processes like I did before. And that's oftentimes very disheartening for an athlete, a competitor, somebody who owns their own business. It shouldn't be that hard because that's what somebody's told us, right? Somebody told us a long time ago in our lives that if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. Well, that's usually from somebody who's retired,
yeah, right,
sold their business, or has got more money in the bank than they ever have. And I think those are critical. I think another one that we have to remember is that while we compare ourselves to others, we'll never win that game. And that is human. If somebody tells me I don't really want to do that, I want to get to a spot where I don't care what people think. The easy answer is then you're going to be a sociopath because those are the only people in the world who really do not care. But we have to be careful to not compare in a way that leads us to lose, right? That we only focus on the things that other people do well that tends to match what we do poorly or that we have insecurity with. So when we fixate on what other people are doing well and we tend to look at other people and say, God, they just have it figured out. They're just playing so good. That coach has the best culture. It usually reflects on the fact that we don't. But to also that point, we tend to get resistant to information and feedback. And the more resistance we have, the worse it gets. And in that, we get more mentally rigid. It has to follow a certain way. It has to, we tend to want to reinforce what we're experiencing. And I have a client that I've worked with, a professional golfer, who is very much like this, is that the harder they struggle, the more rigid, the more resistant they get, and the more they argue about making changes. And what that really means is that they're afraid to give up what they have. Because even in the struggle, there is a reassurance of being in that struggle is okay, because the unknown of the struggle that follows is significantly worse. So we have to be careful there.
Yeah. Now, I forgot to mention early on that I was on your webinar the other night, so I sort of stole some of the things to talk about from that, and it was great. It was really neat. It was a delight to do so. When I sent questions to you, and I was thinking about this a second ago, I mean, I talked about, and I even asked you about one of the things that you thought was really important was being you, but you also talked about in the book something I never had a take on the role of apathy in the way you talked about it in the book, and that seeing it as positive.
Well,
right. And it's not that it's always at every level it is, but it's a part of the journey, right? Maybe that's the way to say it.
100% it is. And it's part of the journey because it happens to everybody, right? We get worn out and tired. And we just don't feel like apathy, to me, the way I look at it is apathy is the moment when we have a realization that our efforts just are not making a difference and we feel powerless. But we always get to that spot in any kind of journey. We have a moment where it's like, is this really worth it? And so the fact that we're feeling apathetic is not a problem. The problem with apathy is we start recruiting other people to believe the way we believe, and we look for supporters, and we look for early agreeers and adopters that say the same things that we do. That's a problem. What's not a problem is the fact that we even feel that way. We don't have to be positive all the time. We don't have to be happy. In fact, in psychology, we often argue that the people who have a glass half full mindset are not as accurate as people who are glass half empty. There is a lot of unjustness in this world. There's a lot of frustration. There's a lot of disappointments. There's a lot of anger, a lot of things in this world that just aren't right, but we can still make our world better. We can still look at a day and say, I had a really hard time out there today, but I was able to do this. And that doesn't mean that it's fully justice. I mean, there are times that people get totally hosed by officiating. There's days that coaches pick the wrong player. Those are all accurate, but we can still find the fact of, it's not trying to find just necessarily the positive thread, but it is maybe that there's an aspect of our environment that we can improve. And so even in the misery, we can always find a way to push through it.
Now, the other night you said two things that I really loved, and I think that I help a junior college golf team. Okay, I'm the putting coach and also club stuff. But you talked about it's important to not compete against yourself and compete against the uncertainty of the challenge. And it's so easy to forget that. But also, when you have your B game, don't be trying to make it into your A game or go searching for that. Right. I thought those two were extremely powerful from a golf standpoint.
Well, it's from anything, right? I mean, the reason I hate when I hear people say the only competitor you have is the man who stands or the female who stands in the mirror. Then you're always going to lose. You're never going to be content and happy with what you do. You're just going to continue to beat yourself up. We compete against the puzzle. We compete against life and whatever's happening. Imagine if we looked at any kind of competition as an obstacle course. And that's what life really is. There's unknowns. There's uncertainty. There's trap doors. There's things that knock us off the path. There's mud pits. There's times that we're on top, but then we have to slide back down and go back down again. Those are all accurate. And so when we sit there and think that, we're only competing against ourselves, we're not facing the reality of what's before us. That's what I need us to do, is face the reality before us, which is unknown, difficult, and never a given. And instead of competing against ourselves, let's use ourselves. Let's develop our game plan. Let's find a way to be successful. Let's challenge ourselves to be great and learn and grow every time we're out there. Anytime we do anything other than that, all we're doing is just getting ourselves more and more frustrated. So the hardest thing to do as any kind of player is to go into something not knowing how it's going to go and still find a way to give our biggest effort.
Yeah. And having the B game and being happy with the B game, or sometimes being happy with the C game because you got as much out of it that day as you were going to do it.
Yeah, I think we all assume that we're in total control of what we bring to the ballpark every day. We're not. There are days that we wake up and our neck is stiff. And there are days that we will wake up and we just don't have a lot of good awareness of where our hands are in space. So if that's the case, then why do we have to look at our mental focus, our adrenaline, or our anxieties and all that as dichotomous variables? They're not all or nothing. They're not A or B. There's a continuum. And so sometimes we show up and we just, for some reason, whether it's an external event or an internal event, something changes inside of us that makes it hard and makes it more difficult. And I don't know why that is. I don't know. I wish I could tell you. I wish I could predict it. But the reality of the fact is it does happen. And we instead have to realize it is what it is, and I can't predict it, and I wish I could. I don't know why I had a young man yesterday that called me and was like, I just really, really struggled with focus in this tournament. I don't know why. And we kind of looked at the traditional things. Have you been under the weather? Have you been this? Have you been that? None of them. He's like, no, I actually slept good. I had a lot of fun this week. I had a great week. And he just kind of listened. It's like, okay, well, maybe it was just because. As people, we always want to know the why, but we don't always know the why.
An absolute answer, right? Yeah.
And the absolute answer, the reason we do that is it gives us a little sense of our suffering, our struggle. And instead of saying it just is, our suffering just is, our experience just is.
Yeah. Now, sort of turning everything around, right? I mean, you work with all these people that are in Suckville, but then they get to the point where they kind of get it, right? I mean, what's the fun part besides just that on its own, right? Of that they get it for you and for them. What are they seeing then after they sort of reach that different plateau?
Ultimately, people get it when they go, I can face anything and still find a way. That's a very interesting place to be.
Oh, man.
But immensely powerful. Is that I can handle anything. It doesn't have to go my way. It doesn't have to be a certain way. It's just I can face anything that sits before me. And if you do that, and you realize that you can, it may not be successful and it may not be easy. I mean, shoot, it may not. And you may lose. Or you may struggle, but I can handle it.
Yeah.
When you do that, you have a chance to be successful.
Well, I'm just going to let you kind of end the way you want this to end for the last, 3 or 4 or something minutes, and just talk about whatever else you want to talk about. How about that?
Sure. Well, I'll tell your listeners this. I mean, we know life's hard, and that's not minimizing it in any way. What we know is that any kind of performance requires an effort and requires a process to continue to fight through the uncertainty and the unknowings of that what we fight for. The hardest thing that we have to do is trust ourselves to continue to push forward. We all want an easy answer. We all want a certain outcome to reinforce to us that we're on the right path, that we're going to be successful. But what we have to do is realize that the way we think and the way we see things gives us a great opportunity to handle any circumstance that comes our way, even if it sucks. Even if it's terrible, even if it's miserable, we can still see something that we can do with it. we can still play the game. We don't have to get stuck and feel powerless in the game. And, if we can see that and whatever we're doing to find the success that we have, we can be successful. Where we struggle is when we give up that power or control because we feel like we're powerless to make an outcome. And to break free from Suckville, we have to look at it that we're never really going to reach our potential, but we can focus on making our reality better every day by the choices that we make in the face of the circumstances that we surround ourselves in.
And you're going to go to another level of that with the next book too. And at least I know you're thinking about, doing something that's a little bit more focused toward parents and kids and things like that, which would be great. I mean, I have a 40-ish-year-old son that has 2 kids that really care about achievement, and there's lots to learn for anybody. Right?
Yeah. Well, we all have, right? We all want to succeed for the most part. I mean, we all want to succeed at something. And as parents, we want our kids to have the best opportunities to succeed. And those are our most valuable resources in our world. There's no doubt about it. But that doesn't mean that we're always the best in their sporting life.
Yeah.
But I also shriek and I get really upset when I see and read people putting down or ripping on parents or coaches who post negatively about parents, because we have to put ourselves in the shoes of our parents. Parents are doing everything they can to make sure that they give every opportunity to their kids. And for many parents who are successful in business or life or families or anything like that, they've gotten that way because they've overcome barriers to get there. And many times as coaches, we are their barriers, and they just work to overcome it. And so if we can get back to, listen, here's some safe ground rules to make sure that we're doing the things that are correct, and continue to help out our coaches to give them the tools to be successful and not alienate parents and not put a wall up, then I think we can have a better outcome. But if you talk to any coaches, what's the biggest stress you have in sports today? They'll tell you unanimously, parents. If you ask parents what's the biggest stress that they have, is opportunities for their kids. And so we've got a mismatch there. And so we need to spend a little time of helping people reach the outcome and realize that parents can be an asset. So let's build them as a more successful place to be.
And also they're helping their kids with what's going to be the next phase of their life. It's not about all the sports. I mean, how many people and how many kids are way up there in the echelon of, being a pro golfer, doing all this, but they all can have a great life. And the things that they learn are awesome things when they're kids and get to do all those things that they're doing.
No, I agree. And I think that's what we just have to do, is just realize that it is a journey and that there are different maturation rates, and sometimes kids struggle, but what can we model to them about dealing with that struggle? That's what matters.
Yeah. Thanks for taking the time to do this today. It's a great book. I'm going to put a link in the show notes to your website, but to Amazon. And are you still selling the book through your site, or?
We are, and it's we're currently out of stock, which is a wonderful problem. But we have new books coming in next week, and we're excited about that. But you can always get them on Amazon. You can buy them through our website. Whatever's easier for you. If you're international, then you need to go through Amazon. It's just their shipping rates are just they make it doable. If you called me from an international site, it's just so expensive. But if you want it from me, or you ask me to sign it for you, just go through my website at BhrettMcCabe.com, and that's BhrettMcCabe as in boy E.
Thanks, Bhrett. I appreciate it. This will be live next Wednesday. Can't wait to get it out there.
I appreciate that, sir.
All right.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Take care.
Take care.
The Golf Improvement Podcast is sponsored by Tony Wright and Game Improvement Golf. Tony creates exceptional golf clubs. You shoot lower scores.
Bhrett, thanks for sharing your knowledge with my listeners and for creating Break Free from Suckville. I put links in the show notes to where you can buy Brett's book directly from his website and get him to personally sign your copy, or where you can buy the book on Amazon.com. This is one interview that I guarantee I'll listen to again in the future. and I'll review all of those little sticky page markings I made in the book while I was reading it and reviewing it. My shout-out today is about my own ongoing search for ways to avoid heel spur surgery. I found an inexpensive, well-reviewed source of a full shoe orthotic made by a company called Footshare. And I'm also wearing an ice split to keep my foot extended while I'm sleeping. So far, I'm seeing some really great results, but there are no overnight successes here, I'm sure, for me. I just have to keep up with it day by day. Well, that's it for today. Gary Nickel and Carl Morris, writers of the new book, The Lost Art of the Short Game, had a conflict last week, but the day after this podcast is live, I'll be interviewing them about their terrific new book in their Lost Art Golf Book series. See you in 2 weeks. Take care and stay safe.
Game Improvement Golf, your source of information and inspiration to become an exceptional golfer now. www.gameimprovementgolf.com